Once upon a time, there was a voice so raw and so human that it could sound like love and war in the same breath. People would play her songs at weddings. But the truth is, her life was not a fairy tale. It was a fight. Her name was Etta James, one of the greatest singers to ever touch rhythm and blues, soul, rock, gospel, and the blues. And behind the beauty of the music was a story full of abandonment, exploitation, addiction, pain, reinvention, and a legacy that outlived every attempt to break her. Etta James was born as Etta Hawkins on January 25, 1938, in Los Angeles, California. Her mother, Dorothy, was only 14 years old, and Etta grew up not knowing who her father truly was. From the beginning, her life was unstable. She moved between homes, between adults who raised her, and she learned early that she couldn't rely on life to be gentle. But there was one place that made her feel chosen: the church. By the time she was only 5 years old, she was already singing in the choir, and even as a child, she didn't sing like a child. She sang like somebody trying to survive.
I always was a big mouth, and there's old temperamental Etta. So I figured, well, what the heck?
Etta James was the original queen of soul. Her music should have made her millions. So why did she live a tragically poor life before coming to an even more tragic end? From an abusive childhood and time behind bars, to severe battles with substance use and selling her body for money. Watch this video to find out about the tragic life and end of Etta James, and also find out why Etta James hated Beyoncé so much.
How do you stay looking so fabulous?
I don't know. Maybe because Beyonce came along and I'm trying to keep up with her.
Etta's life was one of tragic turmoil right from the start. Her mother, Dorothy Hawkins, was only 14 when she gave birth to Etta. She earned her money by working on street corners and spent most of that money again on substance use and alcohol. Too young and reckless to raise her own child, Dorothy would often be out in the streets all night, hustling or chasing after willing men. In her memoir, Etta wrote how her mother sometimes only returned the next day, and how she was left on her own, crying, hungry and afraid that Dorothy would never come back, that no one would ever find me. Deemed unfit to procreate by the state, Dorothy became one of the many victims of a horrific procedure that was common practice at the time: forced sterilization. As per a PBS News article, forced sterilization laws were an accepted means of protecting society from the offspring of those individuals deemed inferior or dangerous: the poor, the disabled, the mentally ill, and people of color. An estimated 70,000 women were forcibly sterilized against their will during the 1900s. Etta first lived with family, and was later raised by foster parents Lula and Jesse Rogers, who she affectionately called Mama Lou and Sarge. "I called her Mama. She was the woman who wound up raising me while Dorothy ran in and out of my life like a crazy nightmare," Etta wrote. By age 5, Etta's talent for singing was discovered by the musical director at her local church, Professor James Earl Hines. He gave Etta her first professional singing lessons, but would also physically discipline her when she sang from her chest and not from her gut. He taught her how to sing like your life depends on it, Etta said. Well, turns out mine did.
She always gave her all and sang every song as if it was their last song to sing.
At home, the abuse was even worse for 5-year-old Etta. Her stepfather Sarge would sometimes host poker evenings that ran late into the night. Drunk, he would force her out of bed at ungodly hours to sing for him and his equally drunk friends. Etta, who often wet the bed, had to stand there in her soaked pajamas and act like a good little performer. Sleepy, humiliated, mad enough to spit, I'd stand there and sing out some stupid song, hating every second of it. If Etta dared to refuse, Sarge would physically discipline her with his razor strap. The dreadful humiliation caused Etta to have a distinct hatred throughout her life for performing on demand. By age 10, Etta had the powerful, deep voice of an adult, and it was clear that she was destined for fame. Realizing this, Sarge tried to control her inevitable singing future. He ended her lessons with Hines and withdrew her from the church. It shattered Etta's heart, and even at such a tender and innocent age, sent her spiraling into depression. When Etta was 12, more tragedy struck. Her adoptive mother, Mama Lou, died, and Etta was forced to live with her real mother in San Francisco. However, Dorothy was just as unfit as ever to be a mother. She was never there when I got off from school, so I could pretty much do what I wanted to do: drinking weed. The following year, after Etta moved in with her mother, Dorothy's profession landed her in jail, leaving Etta on her own again.
Etta was pretty much running wild. I guess the term at the time would have been juvenile delinquent.
Etta's life in school was also a traumatic one. Having a lighter skin tone, she was teased by both the black kids and the white kids. But she was not so innocent herself. She regularly skipped school and hung out with a local girl gang who taught her to steal and do petty crime. Etta would also harass other children, once even breaking a foreign student's arm. Due to the nature of her teenage mother's work, Etta never knew who her father was, but speculated it was the infamous pool hustler professionally known as Minnesota Fats. Throughout her life, Etta and Fats met several times and kept close communication. Although he was very fond of Etta, he never confirmed whether he was her father or not. But Fats also never denied it. Music producer Lupe De Leon, who was close friends of both Etta and Fats, had this to say: "Yeah, he's her dad all right. And I'll tell you something. Knowing him, I could look at Etta James and go, wow, that's Fats. There's no doubt in my mind." And there was no doubt in her mind. Despite her utterly tumultuous relationship with her mother, Etta never blamed Dorothy for constantly abandoning her. If anything, she felt it was the best thing her mother could do for her. If she had tried to take me with her, she was just a child. What would she have done with me? Would I have been singing today? Would I have been anything, you know? However, the relationship between mother and daughter reached a boiling, and Etta could take it no longer.
And when I ran away from home at about 14.
After running away, Etta moved in with two sisters from New Orleans, Abby and Jean. There she discovered the wonderful sound of doo-wop rhythm and blues.
By the time Etta became a teenager, she wasn't just talented, she was dangerous. The kind of talent that makes grown people nervous because it can't be controlled. In the early 1950s, Etta began performing and recording. And in 1955, she released a breakout hit called The Wallflower, also known as Roll With Me, Henry. It was big in the black community, big on the R&B charts, and big in the streets. But then something happened that would become a pattern in her life. Her music and her style got copied. A cleaned-up cover of her song made it into the pop market faster than she ever could. That was the music business back then. Black artists could be the blueprint and still be treated like they didn't matter.
You ever drop a hit so good the industry snatches it and hands it to somebody else? That's exactly what happened to Etta James, the teenage powerhouse voice behind Roll With Me, Henry. In 1955, young Etta James released The Wallflower, Roll With Me, Henry. It was bold, playful, and climbing the R&B charts fast. But the industry wasn't ready for a young black woman leading mainstream music. Enters Georgia Gibbs, a white pop singer. The label rushed her into the studio to record a cleaned-up version called Dance With Me, Henry. Same melody, same groove, but stripped of its edge and packaged for white radio, a practice known as whitewashing. And here's the kicker. Gibbs' version shot straight to #1 on the pop charts. Meanwhile, Etta's original stayed boxed into the so-called race records category. 2 songs, 1 voice behind it all, and only one got the credit. Etta James had the originality, Georgia Gibbs had the machine. And this wasn't just one song. This was a pattern. Black women created the blueprint while others cashed the checks. So the next time you hear Dance With Me, Henry, remember it was Etta's fire that lit that record. Drop a mic emoji in the comments if you're ready to give black women the credit they've always deserved.
By 1960, Etta James was stepping into the era that would seal her name into history forever. That year, she released her debut album called At Last, and the title track, At Last, became her signature song. Her voice was something people didn't know how to describe. It sounded like a woman who had lived 5 lifetimes, soft enough to comfort you, but strong enough to shake you. And what made Etta so powerful was this. She didn't belong to one genre. She could sing soul, blues, jazz, gospel, and rock like it was all born in the same place, her chest. But while the public was falling in love with her voice, behind the scenes, her life was becoming chaotic. Etta's story includes many reports of abusive relationships, control, and violence behind closed doors. And in the entertainment industry, especially during that era, Black women had almost no protection. She was surrounded by fame, but that didn't mean she was safe. And then came the addiction. Etta James battled heroin addiction for years, and addiction didn't just steal time, it opened the door to instability, legal trouble, disappearances, and people taking advantage of her. This is where her story stops being music history and becomes a warning. A woman can be legendary and still be vulnerable.
By the 1960s, Etta James started using heroin. The first time she used it, she overdosed. James would also frequently suffer from severe withdrawal symptoms if she was unable to get any drugs. In Rage to Survive, she wrote, "If I hit a dry period, I'd get sick. Over the long course of my smack addiction, I was sick 80% of the time. Sick or running the streets looking to cop. If I actually managed to get high the other 20% of the time, I'd be lucky." James ended up prioritizing her heroin habit above all else. Even her singing was just a means to an end. I found work when I had to. I was essentially working for my habit.
In the 14 years that she was with Chess Records, she only received $10,000. And it hardly mattered that she was being cheated because she used her money for drugs. Her manager was arrested for selling drugs, and she herself went to jail twice for passing bad checks. And she realized that something was really wrong whenever she was asked by an 80-year-old man to pleasure him orally. In 1969, she married a man by the name of Artis Mills, and he really loved her and he really wanted her to get off drugs, but he ended up taking the rap for her when drugs were found, and he was given a 10-year prison sentence. While he was locked up, she hooked up with a man by the name of Sam Dennis, and their son Cemento was born in 1976. She finally got clean in 1973. However, she traded one vice for another, and she ended up gaining weight, and she weighed as high as 336 pounds. She began to have health problems, and she had financial issues as well because she had to keep performing in order to make a living. And that is a very sad reality to a lot of artists who were in the 50s and 60s, a lot of Black artists in particular who were cheated out of their contracts. They literally have to perform because if they don't, they won't have any money. And one person that I remember telling you guys about a couple of years ago was Jackie Wilson, when he was literally on stage and he collapsed. Now, this is not to say that white people can't get bad deals, but I think that because of the economic disparity that exists, Black and brown artists are more susceptible to getting a bad deal. But yes, in the 70s, she hit the club circuit to support herself, and the Rolling Stones took her on tour in 1978, and that kind of exposed her to a new generation of fans. She then began to perform at the top jazz festivals in the world, such as the Montreal Jazz Festival, and she also often performed at free summer arts festivals throughout the United States. But in the 80s, she relapsed again, but after a trip to Betty Ford, she kicked the habit for good. So as I stated before, Etta James performed well into the 80s and the 90s, and she actually won her first Grammy Award for Best Jazz Vocal Performance in 1994. The album that she recorded was a Billie Holiday tribute album, and it was called Mystery Lady Songs of Billie Holiday. And this album set a trend of incorporating more jazz elements in her music. She had many complications with her weight, and in 2002, she decided to get weight loss surgery. Her weight had gone past 400 pounds, and when she performed, she often had to be escorted on and off the stage in the wheelchair. She got the surgery, and she lost a whopping 200 pounds. Now, in part 3, I'm going to talk about Cadillac Records.
Now people sometimes ask, did the government try to stop Etta James? Was the CIA involved? Was she targeted? The truth is, Etta James was not mainly known as a political activist like some other artists, so there is no strong evidence that she was targeted by agencies like the CIA, but that doesn't mean the system didn't harm her. She lived in a time where Black artists were exploited, copied, and underpaid. She lived in an industry where contracts could be traps, and she lived in a society where addiction could turn into punishment instead of help. So maybe it wasn't a secret government mission, but it was still a system that crushed people like her every day.
Did you know that heroin withdrawal accidentally created the sound of gangster rap? In 1960, Etta James stumbled into Chess Records in Chicago, fighting a brutal addiction. She was there to record At Last, but the drugs had taken control. Between takes, James would explode into violent screaming fits, cursing at musicians with raw fury. Her voice cracked and growled with an aggression nobody had ever heard before. Engineer Ron Marlowe secretly kept his tape machines rolling, capturing every profanity-laced outburst. Hours of James ranting over backing tracks were stored away and forgotten. 26 years later, Eazy-E discovered these bootleg recordings in a dusty crate. He immediately recognized something revolutionary in that withdrawal-fueled rage. That uncontrolled anger became the vocal template for NWA. Etta James's darkest moment accidentally birthed hardcore rap's signature sound. Her pain became a generation's voice.
One chapter in Etta's life that many people don't know is her identity journey. At one point, Etta became connected to Harlem circles and was associated for a time with the Nation of Islam. She even used the name Jamesetta X during that period. Some people online twist this into gossip. But the truth is, in that era, many Black artists were searching for discipline, meaning, and identity, while the world around them felt violent and unstable. It wasn't about controversy, it was about survival. In 1967, Etta recorded one of the most heartbreaking songs ever written, I'd Rather Go Blind. This wasn't just music. This was a woman taking pain, real pain, and turning it into art so powerful that people still feel it today. That's why Etta couldn't be replaced. Many singers can sing notes, but Etta sang consequences. Etta's life was not a straight line. It was peaks, valleys, disappearances, and returns. But after years of struggle, she began to receive the recognition she deserved. In 1993, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2003, she received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. The world was finally admitting what the Black community already knew. Etta James was not just great, she was one of the greatest. In 2009, Etta made headlines after criticizing Beyoncé for performing At Last during Barack Obama's inauguration. The internet tried to make it a diva war, but people close to her later explained that she was battling serious illness at the time. If the new generation wants the truth about Etta James, here it is. She was not just a love song. She was not just a wedding moment. She was not just a voice. She was a survivor of abandonment, a fighter against exploitation, a woman who carried trauma in her chest, and still showed up to sing like she owed the world honesty. Etta James didn't just sing At Last. She lived everything it costs to finally say it.
Everything that I sing about, I pick all my songs. Everything that I sing about is about something that I have experienced.
When they weren't doing music, that's when the drama came in.
Right.
But other than that, it was all fun. It was really a good way. I feel I wouldn't take anything back.
Etta James passed away just 5 days before what would have been her 74th birthday after major health complications. But her life, and specifically the years before her death, were filled with so much pain, anguish, and regret.